Hello everyone. Welcome to this special interview conducted by the Magazine Committee of Political Science Association, Shahid Bhagat Singh College, University of Delhi.
Over the past few weeks, the committee has had privilege of hosting interviews with distinguished personalities, including Rituraj Sharma, IRMS officer, Professor Nupur Ray from Kamala Nehru College, and Professor Manoranjan Mohanty, distinguished professor at the Council for Social Development, IAS Anubhav Singh, and IPS Ashna Chaudhary. We also look forward to future interviews with Christopher Jefferlett from King's College London and Professor Ashok Acharya, University of Delhi.
Today, I, Pratik Agarwal,
And I, Aman Kakkar.
students of Political Science Honours, are thrilled to welcome our distinguished guest for today, Mr. Shivshankar Menon.
Before we dive deep into this conversation, let's welcome our convener of Department of Political Science, Dr. Rityusha Mani Tiwari. Ma'am, please address us.
Thank you, Aman. Thank you, Pratik. It's with immense pleasure and anticipation that I welcome you, Ambassador Menon, for this interview with the Magazine Committee of the Department of Political Science. We are delighted to have you, sir. And just by way of a very short introduction, we are a department of 13 faculty members, with four of us having specializations in different domains of international relations. And in the course of our everyday conversation with students in the classroom, we have had opportunities to deliberate upon various contours of India's foreign policy, with bringing out a multitude of contexts which basically foreground certain questions that confront our foreign policy today. Some of them, of course, are the need to balance development goals of India with the environmental situation in international arena, the commitments of being a rising power, the default question of balancing objectives and values of foreign policy, as it were. Of course, there's another tough balancing act to follow, which is often repeated in our classrooms, which is India's relationship with major powers like the US, Russia, China, and the strategic options that India has to maintain autonomy while engaging with these nations. And therefore, there is a constant evaluation required of our regional, multilateral, bilateral engagement strategies, and of course, the efficacy of initiatives that we study in our everyday classroom context. Things like NAM, the relevance of NAM, as well as something as emergent as Quad in terms of their ability and efficacy to address the questions confronting our foreign policy today. So, in that spirit, today's conversation will go a long way in adding to the understanding of our students, as well as providing food for thought for all of us. So, welcome once again, and I hand over the proceedings back to Aman and Pratik.
Thank you so much, ma'am.
And now moving ahead with our special guest for this interview, Mr. Shivshankar Menon. He is an Indian diplomat who served as National Security Advisor of India under Prime Minister Manmohan Singh. He had previously served as the Foreign Secretary in the Ministry of External Affairs. Prior to that, he was an Indian High Commissioner to Pakistan and Sri Lanka and Ambassador to China and Israel. He is renowned author of two books, Choices Inside the Making of India's Foreign Policy and India and Asian Geopolitics, the Past and Present.
The topic for today is current trajectory of India's foreign policy. And I would like to read an excerpt from Mr. Menon's book, India and Asian Geopolitics, Past, Present, and the Future. Past, Present, which says, independent India's foreign policy has managed three geopolitical phases and their transitions from 1947 to 1960s, a bipolar, nuclearized Cold War world to which India responded with non-alignment and advocacy of decolonization, disarmament, and multilateralism. From the early 1960s to the mid 1980s, to which India responded by consolidating its immediate periphery and tightening links with the Soviet Union. And after 1989, the unipolar globalization decades, when India reformed itself, integrated its economy with the world, and transformed its relation with the United States. Today, we will be hearing from Mr. Menon regarding his views on current challenges and trajectories and the way forward for India's foreign policy.
First questions are, what are some of the continuities, diversions, and new trends in India's foreign policy since 1947, in your opinion?
Well, thank you for having me, and thank you for asking me, and thank you for that very flattering introduction, and for reminding me of what I've written. It's always dangerous to have your words quoted back to you, but thank you for that. About continuity and divergences in policy, I think, as that excerpt says, to my mind, we've gone through, well, now we're in the fourth phase of sort of Indian foreign policy since independence, and we've reacted tactically to the changes that we see in the world situation around us, right? But strategically, I think we have fundamental continuity, and this is true across governments. And for me, the most basic continuity of that is strategic autonomy. Now, each government wants to be seen as different, better, new. So they've had different words, whether you call it non-alignment, you call it multi-directional policy, you call it genuine non-alignment. I mean, different governments have used, and each one will say, we are unique, we are better, nobody else knew what they were doing. That's all right. That's part of democratic politics. But for me, the continuities are strategic. So strategic autonomy is one. The other is that the goal of Indian foreign policy is the transformation of India. And to make India a country which is prosperous and secure, where every Indian citizen can realize their full potential. Every Indian citizen. And that, for me, has been common. Now, we might have differences on what kind of India we will ultimately be and so on. But those are internal differences, but externally. And thirdly, I think every government has recognized that we can't do this alone. We can't do this by cutting ourselves off from the world, that we need to work with the world, partly because of our resource environment, but also because, frankly, we don't have the resources to make ourselves a developed, prosperous, secure country on our own. We need to work with the rest of the world. And these three are, to my mind, the basic continuities. Within this, tactics will change, depending on the world situation, the situation you find yourself in, but also depending on your capabilities. As your capabilities grow, your ability to do things will change. But so far, it's been tactical, and I expect it to stay, the changes to stay tactical for some time to come, because it's going to take a long time before we abolish hunger, before we abolish poverty, before we abolish disease, before we can say that we are truly developed in terms of human development and all our citizens.
Thank you so much, sir. Moving forward, I would like to ask, do you think India has the potential to reshape the world order in the post-COVID world?
Not for some time. Today, we don't have the power. And let's be honest, we like to feel good about ourselves, so does every other country on earth, which is why you'll notice nobody in the world except Australia describes themselves as a middle power, which is also why all governments will tell you this is a multipolar world, because the implication is we are a pole and we can shape the environment. It's very flattering for all governments to tell their own people that, look at us, we're so important. But let's face the facts. Today, when you look at the way power is distributed in the world, almost 50% of the world's economic power is concentrated with two countries, China and the US. A little less of world GDP is concentrated again in the same two countries. So they are in a category by themselves. But China is not the same as the US. The US is the sole military superpower in the world who can project military power where she wants, when she wants, across the world. China is still a regional military power. She's a global economic superpower. So you have a situation today where, now this is much better, by the way, than the Cold War. In the Cold War, over 80% of world military power was in the two blocs, was in the Warsaw Pact and the NATO and the US. And about the same proportion of world economic power was actually in the developed world in these two blocs. So that was actually a much worse world. You notice that today we've managed to achieve a situation where over half of Asia's GDP is India and China, where thanks to what we have achieved, particularly in the last 35 years, what we have done is by every metric of power, we have improved our position vis-a-vis every other country except China, which improved her position even faster than us in the same period. So when I would say that, can we shape the environment? Yes, if we work with other people. But we can't do it alone. And there's no guarantee that you can actually shape the environment, because that also depends on the environment, on the nature of the environment. And I mean, my own view is, when you look at the world today, why did I say we're in a fourth stage? We went through a bipolar Cold War. Then we went through actually a much more confused Cold War, where in Asia, at least, the bipolar had broken down with Sino-Soviet split from the 60s to, then Soviet Union collapsed 91, got into a unipolar world until 2008, global financial crisis, right? Now, where are we? To my mind, you are between orders. You're in a world adrift. Why do I say this? Because economically, we are multipolar. It's true. There are three big poles now. I mean, there's Asia, with China as the leading economy, RCEP organized them, USMCA in North America, and EU. And these account for, so economically, it is a multipolar. Militarily, I just told you, it's still a unipolar world with regional challenges to the global superpower, to the sole global superpower. Politically, you can see how confused the world is. There's no agreed order. There's no norms, principles. I mean, when the Court of Arbitration tells China you're wrong on the South China Sea, what do? They ignore it in 2016, right? So therefore, I think this is a world between orders. So can we shape this world? It'll take a tremendous amount of power to shape a world. You know, I mean, when the US created the post-war system, she accounted for over 45% of world GDP. And the rest of the world had just fought itself to a standstill and almost near death through 2 world wars. So the US was really predominant, and then built the system that we take as the post-war Western system. Right? So let's take care of ourselves. Let's get our own people to the stage of being prosperous and secure and achieving their potential. Let's abolish our own, poverty, hunger, disease, etc. We have enough to do, and use the world for that.
Truly said, sir. Your realistic point of view of the world today is truly remarkable for us to understand.
It's
So
not a
moving
popular
forward,
point of view, by the way, and because it goes against theory, it also doesn't flatter politicians, because it suggests that they've made a big mess of it. So it's not a popular point of view. It's not something you'll hear from governments.
but if I may say so, in our lectures, in our classes as well, we are promoted to have a critical point of view,
Good,
and these thoughts
very
do
good. You have
really
good
mean a lot.
teachers.
Yeah,
Good.
definitely we do. So, actually, I have read your recent book, so that's why a lot of questions are from those only.
Oh,
So, in your book, you mentioned that India is a country of Kautilya, Gandhi, Kalidas, Ashok, and Nehru, and we are a nation built with their ideas. My question is, how far have their ideals propelled India's foreign policy, and what all needs to be extracted from their ideas?
none of them wrote a manual for you, right? It's not like if something happens in the world, I mean, Israel bombs Beirut, doesn't mean you pick up their book and you look at it and it tells you exactly, okay, now step 1, do this, step 2, do that. No. What they all teach you is how to think and how to think about these problems. They give you an approach to grand strategy. I mean, what's Kautilya's brilliance? That he thinks of a state system, tells you the elements of power in a state, how to think about what states do, how they interact, 2,000 years before anybody else has even done this. In fact, frankly, until this last century, the English school is the first people who start looking at an international community and tell you how international society works in a sense. So it's remarkable he's actually, and he's talking about a world, but because he looks at it in the broader sense, and it still applies today. He's talking about a world composed of all kinds of states, city-states, confederations, the Lichavis, the Shakya, Buddha's people were part of that, his tribe. So tribes, kingdoms, city-states, empires, the modern empire. So he's talking about a world which is plural and how they all interact with each other. He teaches you how to think of that, how a state gets power. Same thing, you learn from each of them, you learn how to think about these problems. It's not that, they said you must do this, therefore you do that. You still have to apply your mind to your problems. Your problems are still your problems. You can't duck that. But for me, we're lucky that we have a heritage of thinking about these issues, which we can draw on, which we can actually take inspiration from. And we also have a record of actually dealing with them successfully, which not many civilizations have. That kind of heritage or that kind of record, which I think it says something. So it should give us enough confidence that we can think these problems through for ourselves and we know how to deal with them.
Thank you so much, sir. So moving forward, in your past events, you have talked about the past and present realities of Asia or South Asian geopolitics. So if you were to comment on the biggest challenges to India's rise, apart from China, what would it be?
It's actually our resource endowment, because we still have to solve the fundamental problem of energy. We depend on the world for energy, and we import, 80% of our energy needs from abroad. And that's one. The other is we also need, I think, again, a clearer vision of what kind of India are we trying to build. If we're going to spend our time arguing among ourselves and fighting among ourselves and making this polarizing ourselves, then frankly, it's going to be very difficult to create the kind of developed India in which every Indian can achieve their potential, feels well, which is ultimately what we're about. This is what Kautilya says, right? Yoga Kshema. The happiness of the king should lie in the happiness of the people. It's not in his own. And what he has to achieve, what we have to achieve, is what's good for the people. And if that's our goal, the things that stop us from doing so, the world will always be difficult, because the world doesn't have an interest in what you are trying to achieve. In fact, as you rise, you must expect that beyond a point, established powers will actually resent your rise, because they see power as zero-sum. They see you as taking away their stature, their power in the world. So the more you rise, the more resistance you will face. China faces this problem today, clearly, from the established powers, right? She grew very fast, and as far as she can see, she can't understand why they're preventing her from doing what is good for her. So it seems to me that if you are to list things in priority, what are the things we should be doing, right? What should we worry about? You should list them according to this one goal: transforming India. Does it affect it? Can it stop us? Can it help us? And we need to increase what helps us, mitigate or deal with what can stop us. For me, that's the one goal that's worth applying. Not ego, not status, not any of these other things, not revenge for history. You can waste your time doing all these things, but much more important is what you do for your own people to transform India.
Rightly said, sir. Having a basic goal of transformation of India alongside accepting a lot of critiques and resistance. That would be the long way to go.
Yeah.
So, for the next question, sir, I actually saw one of your interview clips with the Indian Express.
I talk too
It was,
much.
I guess, 2-3 years back.
Yeah.
And you mentioned that we are not yet uh, acceptable to claim the title of Vishwa Guru in India. So, It was before the G20 had happened. After that, I would like to ask you, what are the areas where India should focus actually? Or are we yet suitable to accept that title?
Vishwa Guru, a guru needs a shishya also, right? This is a two-way process. It's not a self-appointed job. So first, you must have some knowledge. And in today's world, what is that knowledge? Who contributes to the body of human knowledge? Scientists. I mean, science is driving most change today. Technology in various forms comes out of science. What is your contribution to basic science today? What is your contribution to human knowledge? Are you an exporter or an importer of IP, of intellectual property? You have to ask yourself the basic questions. Then you can be a Vishwa Guru. When people come to you and ask you to teach them, after all, Pandavas went to Drona, right? People don't. The students have to come to you and want to learn from you. And then you are a guru. So first, I think, concentrate on building up that body of knowledge. Start making fundamental contributions to human knowledge in various ways. And you have. You've done it in the past, you will do it in the future also. But you need to create an environment which does that. Then the world will learn from you. And the world will learn from you in various ways, whether it is, and I don't mean only in terms of fundamental knowledge or the fundamental sciences and so on, but also in your practices, your political practice, whatever. They will look at what you've done. And if they find it works and it looks good to them, and they think it'll work for them, they'll pick it up. But I think if by any definition you are still far away from that definition, from that stage. The idea of Vishwa Guru, when Vivekananda used to speak of it, his summary was that we need to learn what European society has done and science, and ally it with Indian thinking and spirituality, Indian metaphysics. And that combination would make you a Vishwa Guru and bring peace to the world. Now that is the source of the idea. But we can't forget both parts. He meant reform yourself also. Change yourself into a modern society and economy, and be true to your traditions of thinking and so on, and contribute. Then, you'll be a Vishwa Guru. And that's what I meant when I said that you can't call yourself a Vishwa Guru today yourself. Secondly, you shouldn't be calling yourself a Vishwa Guru, because the world has to come to you.
Truly said, sir. Knowledge is the key to be a Vishwa Guru. Also, we were lucky enough to hear you at IIC the last time you talked about Israel,
We met that.
of Israel and Palestine.
Yeah.
Also, our question was left unanswered. But connecting to that, we would like to ask, what role do you see for India to play in Israel-Palestine and also Russia-Ukraine wars? Also, do you think India's neutral position can backfire in later phases?
A mediator can only be successful if both parties who are actually involved in the conflict want a way out, but neither of them can climb down off the tree that they've climbed up, right? Then the mediator offers a way out and can be successful. So this is not a test of your cleverness or your wisdom or how good you are. This is a test actually of the situation and of the two parties to the conflict and how much they both want it. Today, in both these cases that you mentioned, Ukraine and Palestine, it doesn't look as though either side actually wants a quick resolution. In any case, right now they're all waiting for a week for the US elections to see what happens and who wins, because it will make a difference to their support and what they get. But that apart, is it ripe today for Indian intervention as mediation and so on? I would say that what we've said is right. We're available, we're ready to help, but we'd like to see them seeking it. And so this, by making it available, What we have done right, I think, is to be objective about the situation. I wouldn't call that being neutral. That doesn't mean that you just split the difference down the middle and you say, oh, both sides are equally right or equally wrong. No. You take an objective point of view based on what you see, what you think. And if they see that you understand what you're doing and that you have certain principles and can be objective, then actually they will come to you and ask you to mediate, and your mediation could be successful. But as I said, first primary condition is they must want it. They must want a way out. I don't think that's quite the case yet, because they're still talking past each other. As long as either side thinks they can win, it's unlikely that they look for a mediated or fair solution. And that's part of the problem. I think
This truly
I
makes
think,
sense.
yeah, this it's just a basic fact of psychology. And then, of course, their internal politics also complicates it considerably. So.
Rightly said, sir. So the next question we have is, with the regime changes in Bangladesh, Myanmar, and Afghanistan, it is becoming difficult for India to establish firm communications after the fall of their popular regimes. What is your take on it, and what do you think India should do to navigate through these difficulties to establish proper communications?
Well, I'm not sure the communication is a problem, because traditionally, at least, we've always stayed in touch with everybody in our neighborhood, whether opposition or ruling party and so on. I hope we have not forgotten that. Because ultimately, our neighbors are our neighbors, whether we like them or not. And they are composed of all kinds of people, all kinds of parties, all kinds of. And given our situation in the subcontinent, where borders are porous, where there are cross-border ethnicities across every border, where if you actually look at it, informal trade is almost twice as much as formal trade across every border that you have, not just Pakistan, but even with Bangladesh, with Myanmar, and so on. So in this kind of situation, and where people, your affinities, in food, religion, language, everything, people marry across our borders, quite Chin are Mizos, Chin on the Myanmar side are Mizos on our side. Given that situation, I don't think you can afford to say, I'll only talk to my friends, or I'll only talk to whoever's ruling, whoever wins your election. You have to stay in touch with everybody, deal with everybody. Of course, on the basis of your interests. I mean, you don't have to sacrifice your interests, but you have common interests here in peace, in development, at the broadest level, and you can also work it out in practice. So I'm not sure that communication is the problem. I think the problem is that, well, there's two fundamental issues here. These are all new states. They may be old nations, but they're all relatively new states. Our subcontinent has been partitioned over and over again. I mean, there's at least 4 partitions of Bengal in 1 century. You look at Assam has been partitioned, Myanmar separated in 36, etc., etc. So because they are new states, they are still in the process of nation building, of building a nationalism. And the obvious way of building a nationalism is you need another. And it is India which is preponderant in your life. It's a constant presence. Whether you like it or not in terms of music, film, whatever, it's there in your life, in your politics, in your economy, everything. So they look for outside balancers. It used to be the US, now they look to China, and they will not, this doesn't mean that they want to become clients of China, but they don't want to be anybody's client. They want agency of their own. And for that, they will play between the bigger powers. Exactly what you did between the Soviet Union and the US. When you were weak and you had to, they will do to you. So don't expect monogamy. I mean, don't expect complete And you cannot exclude outside powers from the subcontinent because of this huge preponderance that you have within the subcontinent, and the fact that these are new nation building efforts. So it will always be difficult. It won't be easy. And their internal politics, anyway, is quite complex. You look at Pakistan, you look at Nepal, you look at Bangladesh, very polarized. Even Sri Lanka, which is probably the most stable in terms of internal politics, has gone through convulsions, right, in the last few years. So, and has an economic crisis still. So, for us, therefore, to say, I'll only talk to my friends, I'll only do this, doesn't make sense at all. You need to follow a policy which actually also shows everyone that, look, our interests are not contradictory. We have common interests in peace, in development. Our security interests are compatible, and we need to therefore work with each other. And it's in your interest to work with us, just like it's in our interest to work with you. And I think that kind of policy is the only one that will work in the long run, where you make yourself indispensable to your neighborhood, and your preponderance then works for you rather than as a spur to all kinds of hostile actions.
Well said, sir. I believe this is how a successful diplomacy would look like if we are able to follow these things.
Well, it's not easy. I'm not saying it's going to be easy, but it'll always be bumpy. But you need to remember the big goal. That's the issue.
Thank you so much, sir. So next question is about the recent visit by S. Jaishankar to Islamabad for the SCO meet. And meeting with PM and Foreign Minister of Pakistan has been called by some scholars as the icebreaker between the countries. So what are the possible solutions for like to resolve the conflict with Pakistan or come to a ground that will be beneficial for both the countries?
About the visit, I think we should believe what Jaishankar is telling us. He himself is telling you, I didn't go to settle bilateral issues. I went for SCO. Yes, I had a conversation, but he himself, I think we should believe him rather than over-interpreting it and saying, oh, now bilateral relations are going here, there, wherever. What should we do? That's a much bigger question. And I'm sorry to say this, but I've come to the conclusion that both sides have worked themselves into a situation where their domestic politics actually require a certain managed level of hostility in the relationship. It works for the Pakistan army to have an enemy, but managed. They don't want it to get out of hand. They're not looking for some big military victory, no. But they need a hostile neighbor to justify their role at home. And politically also, it's useful to some people in India also to have a hostile Pakistan for whatever reason. So given that, it seems to me that our domestic politics today prevents any dramatic breakthrough or great progress, but it also means that it will stay managed. That after all, the ceasefire on the LOC has held fundamentally for several years now since they reimposed it. And you can say it's because Pakistan's in an internal confusion, etc., etc. We have other things to worry about, including the Chinese on the other side in Ladakh. But whatever the reasons, so you have animosity, but not out of control. When the Pakistanis get an Indian pilot on their hands, they return him within 24 hours, quickly. They don't let it escalate into an impossible situation where both sides feel. So to that extent, so I'm not saying that, oh, we're doomed, this relationship is terrible. No. I think we are both mature enough, but since it serves domestic politics to have this certain level of animosity, it looks like this will go on for a while. Unless something fundamental changes, either in the domestic politics or in the balance of power between the two sides, or I don't expect anything drastic right now. Ultimately, where will we end up? I still think the closest we came was in the discussions that Sati Lamba had with, which he's written about in his book also, Pursuing Peace, which he wrote before he died a few years ago. So the back channel talks, which went on after 2004 onwards for several years, I think those were really the closest. I think that's where we will end up probably, whoever it is who does it. But today it doesn't seem likely that there's going to be any big breakthrough with Pakistan.
Perhaps the fit example of what recently happened with India and China.
Mhm.
The it seems like the talks are working. There have been some disengagement happening recently.
Mhm.
If that was successful, can we hope something for Pakistan as well?
Well, with China also, I think we need to wait and see. Nobody knows what actually was discussed. We don't know which patrolling points, where the Chinese are going to patrol, until we know the details. This is a limited arrangement. It's an arrangement about patrolling. It's not even, as far as we can see, nothing's been said about a full-scale disengagement, or certainly not about a return to the status quo as it was in April 2020. So I'd hold my horses before jumping to any conclusions about this.
So, as many scholars have speculated, this recent meeting of PM Modi and Xi Jinping in Russia to have opened new doors for India-China relations.
They
So,
must know something more than I do. I don't know what they said, what happened. And I noticed there wasn't any sort of joint announcement, anything after that. So I'm not sure. As I said, I'd be very cautious. This kind of diplomacy takes time, effort, patience. And wish them luck and hope they succeed.
Rightly said, sir. After being in the government for more than 10 years, what changes do you think that the current government should make for a more successful foreign policy in the coming years?
I think their biggest challenge is the fact that the world has changed very fast in the last 10 years, in many ways. The formation of RCP to our east, for instance, the sharpening of China US rivalry and contention, uh, the, the new, it's actually close to an alliance between Russia and China that we see operating in our neighborhood. All these, in many ways, have made life more complicated than it was when they came to power. So they need to find new ways of dealing with these things. I'm sure they're thinking about it. But so far, we haven't seen. So far, it's still what we've seen is a continuation in the fundamentals of older policy, right? Whether it is the transformation of the relationship with the US, whether it's, working both with BRICS SU on the one hand and with the Quad and the Indo-Pacific organizations, IPEF and so on. Act East is really a continuation of Narasimha Rao's Look East. So in many ways, actually, what we're seeing is a continuation of policy in changed circumstances. And that's always a tough thing to do, to actually adjust policy to a strategic shift. And it's hard to say how far this shift will go. Why does everybody worry about the US election next week? Because nobody's quite sure what Trump will do. Will the US continue doing what it's doing? Or will he do a deal with China? Will he, anything is possible with somebody who's unpredictable, right? So it's not an easy situation right now. So far, what they've done, to my mind, makes sense. They've kept our options open, they've maintained strategic autonomy, they've worked very hard for India's transformation, see whether maybe they could have done more to see whether, China plus one, de-risking with China could have worked for us. Maybe all that, one can quibble about the details. But overall, I think in a situation of great uncertainty, I don't think they've done badly in adjusting. But there are fundamental decisions to be taken now. And part of the problem is the neighborhood, where you can see in the relationship with the Maldives, with Bangladesh now, with the others, with Myanmar. I mean, there are big decisions to be taken about Myanmar, as Myanmar seems to be sinking into anarchy and the hold of the junta is weakening. So for me, there are a whole series of things to be done, which let's see. I hope they manage to do those in the months to come.
So,
I
sir, we
don't
have
envy them.
discussed,
I mean, I don't envy them their jobs, frankly. It's a tough world out there.
rightly said, sir. So, we have discussed to China, Russia, then the US elections. And now I would like to come to a conclusive last question from us, which would be that how do you think the Indo-Pacific region is significant for India and its foreign policy? And within the same question, I would like to also ask the India's involvement in Quad and BRICS, and how does it aids to India's achievement of its position in the multipolar world?
Well, if you look at it, as I said, if your criterion is transformation of India, how do you do it? You need the rest of the world because of your resource endowment. You don't have energy. You, in order to, 80% of your imports today are maintenance imports. There are things like fertilizer, potash, things, copper. You don't have non-ferrous metals. These are things you need for your economy, to grow your economy, but also to run it. And 93% of your trade is by sea. So maritime security, the Indo-Pacific, therefore becomes critical for you. And you can say it's not all in the immediate neighborhood. In fact, most of it is outside your immediate neighborhood. 38% of your trade actually goes through the Taiwan Strait. So you need to worry about what's happening across the whole maritime space. It's important for us. But as I said, if your criterion is clear, then you'll know which things are high priority. Who do you work with in this maritime space, in the Indo-Pacific? Those who are present. And who's present? Russia is not present in the Indo-Pacific. You work with the US, you work with Australia, you work with Japan, you work with those whose interests coincide with yours. And that's exactly what you're doing, and you've been doing now for about 15 years. Actually since 2005 when you signed your first defense agreement with the US. But on the continent, who do you work with? The West is absent in Eurasia. Ever since the Americans withdrew from Afghanistan, Iraq, there's nobody in Eurasia from the West physically present. So you work with who you can, traditional friends. You work with Iran, you work with Russia, you try and work with the Central Asians, even though you don't have physical access direct. You work with whoever you can, whoever is present and who is. So you're the only member of the Quad who is both a continental power and a maritime power. All the others are basically islands in geopolitical terms. I mean, what is America? It has, two harmless neighbors and fish on the other sides. And so they have the option of coming and going or withdrawing. Your big concerns are both continental and maritime. And you need to be able to cope with both. So you will work with whoever you can for that. So when people say, oh, but why don't you choose a side? It doesn't make sense from our point of view. Because you need to worry about Eurasia, you need to worry about the Indo-Pacific, and both are going to determine your future. So it seems to me you have no choice but to follow a multi-directional policy. Whatever you call it, strategic autonomy, whatever you want to call it.
For the last few years, Indo-Pacific has been in news so much, and we are lucky enough to get insights and information from you on this topic. And it was a great session, sir. Thank you so much. Now
Thank
we would
you.
like to open the floor for some questions. The audience is here. If they have any questions, please raise your hands and we'll take questions.
Aman and Pratik, if I may just come in for a bit, just take a couple of questions, not more than that, because the ambassador has been speaking for a very long time, so I'm sure it's going to be very tiring. Just a couple of questions, yeah.
So,
Sure, ma'am. So we have a question from Kushagra Mishra. Please unmute Kushagra.
Can you hear him?
Kushab, you can unmute now.
Thank you. Good evening, sir.
Good evening.
Sir, I have just the recent visit of Prime Minister Narendra Modi to the BRICS Summit of 2024, and seeing that BRICS is an emerging organization as parallel to Quad or any more intergovernmental organizations. But sir, just a bit of scholars are being arguing about the question that BRICS inclusion of new states such as Iran, Ethiopia, Saudi Arabia, Egypt, because many new members are applying for BRICS membership, is posing a question on India's role in BRICS then. Because as a nation of India, which is pluralistic and a deep strengthened democracy inside in it. So, what do you think about that? The possible inclusion of new members, which are not a bit sense of democratic and a sharing of a pluralistic nature. Do you think that BRICS in the coming years will fulfill the India's deep strengthen this interest, or what do you think that we should be a part of BRICS, or we should either side leave it?
My own attitude is that BRICS does serve a certain purpose, and it has served a purpose so far. And most of it on the economic side, actually, in creating the new development bank and in creating alternate payment systems which enable you to deal with countries like Russia and so on. It has done some useful work on the economic side, and I think it will continue to do so. I don't think you should worry about its expansion. I mean, frankly, do you want to be a big fish in a small pond or a big fish in a bigger pond? You're India. I mean, I don't know why we worry about other countries. I mean, India is today, whether you look at it in terms of the economy, in terms of our location, in terms of our history, in terms of every which respect, we are a big country. And I don't think we should get worried because, oh, there's more people in the room and not all of them are exactly like us. If that was our attitude, then you we deal with the rest of the world, because the world is going to be full of people who are very different from you, who have their own points of view. We can handle that. We've handled it before when we were much smaller and weaker, and I'm sure we'll do it again. So, and I don't see walking away as a solution. You know, Krishna Menon used to say it's very easy to walk out of a conference, but it's very hard to walk back in.
Thank you so much, sir. We have a hand raised request from Prince. So Prince can go ahead with this question.
Thank you, Pratik. Sir, good evening, sir.
Good evening.
My question to you is, thank you for your enlightening session. Sir, my question is a little bit interesting that what are the two advices that you want to give to the current national security advisors to transform the India?
If I had advice for him, I'd tell him privately. But, you know, luckily, it's not my job to tell him what to do. He knows what to do. If he wants, he'll ask me, I'll tell him. But the last thing I'd do is to embarrass him in public by telling him.
Well, this was a good question.
Good question. Very good question.
Unexpected one.
Mm-hmm.
You can also send your questions via chat box.
Can we,
So
can
do
we
we
have
have
the last question by Pubali now?
yeah.
We
Can
close
we take the last question?
Yeah.
Hello, so am I audible? Just confirming.
I can hear you.
Yeah. Okay. Good evening, sir. This is Pubali Sukriti. I heard your entire session, got various insights into these questions we had in our minds, and my classmates posed them in a very good way. Now, what my question is, sir, because of your career in diplomacy and like serving at different countries with many regional diversities. So can you share like one particular experience where it can be some agreement or some disagreement that happened in any of your experiences, which was very difficult to come out, but you overcame it? Like certain examples. One example, maybe.
I'm not sure that, anything that happened to me is replicable or relevant really. I'm very nervous of getting into the personal in these things. No, it's, I can, I've been lucky actually, because I had a series of jobs where it was actually pretty challenging. Going to Pakistan in 2003 after Parakram as sort of Vajpayee's hand of friendship. He called. I was in Beijing at that time, and he asked me, will you go to Pakistan? Jaoge? He said to me, and I asked him, why me? I mean, I haven't dealt with Pakistan since 1974. This is 2003. And he said to me, the only time he used English with me, he said, because you are innocent. And he roared with laughter at my expense. But what he was saying was very simple. He was actually conveying a serious message, that you're not carrying baggage. You're not going to repeat the old mistakes. You go there and see what you can do. So I was really lucky. I mean, I could try things, do things, confident that I could go back to Vajpayee and explain why I had done it, what we were doing, and that he was ready to experiment, to try and move the relationship forward. So I can't, so yes, there were difficult situations, obviously. I remember ending up arguing with Musharraf and so on. But as long as you're confident that you're speaking for India and that India's behind you, frankly, most of this you can handle. It doesn't matter whether, and so I can't think of anything and I think it's that confidence that sees you through most things. When I was in Peking during Tiananmen, for instance, but that doesn't matter. I think as long as you know you're working for India and you have the backing of your own people, I think that gives you enough strength to deal with most things.
So I believe this question came out of curiosity and inquisitive nature of all of us
Good
to
question.
know
Very
about
good
life.
question.
Yes.
Yeah.
I would now like to request ma'am to please come and please offer a vote of thanks to sir.
Thank you so much, Aman and Prateek, for conducting a very, very interesting session. Thank you so much, Ambassador Menon, for a very engaging, fruitful session, a very long one. So thanks again for that. I think our students have really taken a lot from this session, and these are the questions that they've had since we have begun our conversations. You know, there are first years in the queue, there are second years, third years, and I think this is a bunch which has very, very specific interest in IR and foreign policy and diplomacy. And these are the people who basically try and avail as many opportunities as they can, being situated in Delhi University, in Delhi, to be able to hear from prolific scholars like you. So thanks a lot again. And I would like to thank the magazine committee for providing this platform to us within the department. And of course, to the college administration. I also have along with me my co-convener Rajiv Ranjan Sinha, incidentally another JNU product and specializing in European studies. And yes, so earlier when I was referring to the faculty members who are present in this department who specialize in IR, Rajiv is one of them, a colleague and a friend. And we've been looking forward to having you in person, sir. So it would be our great honor to have you with us in one of our, in-person live sessions where the students can actually get to interact with you also in the offline mode. And I'll stop myself here just before I recall one very, very interesting incident that I had with you, actually, and you wouldn't remember. I was a student, and this is exactly 12 years ago. And my PhD supervisor, Professor Alkacharya, had asked me to, welcome you from JNU Gate and get you to SIS all the way. So basically, your car was entering the gates, and I hopped into your car, and I was like, "Oh my God, I don't know what to say to you." And I had just begun working on my PhD. So within that short drive of 7 minutes sharp, you had managed to ask exactly what was my proposal all about, what were my hypotheses, and managed to give me a lot of feedback on that. So I will never forget, the precise value of time. The 7 minutes for you with you at that point in time was almost like a very, very important, profound session as an insight or from an observer, from a practitioner on all things related to China. So thanks a lot. And I think coming from those 7 minutes, today's 45-minute session and 50-minute session with our students, I think it's in similar tradition. So thank you so much, and we do look forward to having you with us again, hopefully this time physically.
Look forward to that. Thank you. Thank you very much. I really enjoyed that. Thanks. It's good of you. And thank you, Pratik and Aman also. And those questions were really good, actually. Remarkable. Thanks.
Thank you so
Thank you
much.
so much, sir. Adding to ma'am's incident, we just met you at IIC. We had no words to speak. We just got a picture clicked.
Yeah.
And just to say, we got the book signed, and your pen was really lovely. We were talking about the pen.
And may I just add, sir, they were waiting for your session since morning at ISC.
Oops.
That was also perhaps the day when we had that Tagore conference
Yeah,
from
the same
ICS.
day, yeah.
So yes, yeah. So they had attended that, and then they were waiting, and
They
then
were waiting.
yeah. So thank you so much, sir, for
Thank
providing
you.
this opportunity.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you.